I accuse you of the following.
Never to share information with the media. It just didn't sound right to me.
If they really didn't believe in the notes, why wouldn't we have heard that from Savannah when she's talking to law enforcement?
One federal agency, two opposite public claims about the same piece of evidence, and a leak that, according to the Bureau's own training, should never have happened in the first place. Let's look at why. I'm Marcus Wren, the creator of the TEL Index, a framework for analyzing statements and behavior in criminal cases. This is a standalone video analyzing a short NewsNation segment about the Nancy Guthrie ransom notes. A case still fully open, no suspect named. Hit subscribe if you want to see more analysis like this. Nancy Guthrie, the 84-year-old mother of Today co-anchor Savannah Guthrie, disappeared from her Tucson, Arizona home in the early hours of February 1st. The case's first ransom note went to Tucson TV station KOLD on February 2nd, claiming Nancy was safe and demanding cryptocurrency for her release. 4 days later, on February 6th, a second note arrived at the same station, reportedly indicating she had died, with no apology and no new payment demand. At the time, per CNN's own law enforcement sources, investigators believed both notes were genuine communications from whoever had taken her. Today's footage comes from NewsNation's CUOMO, hosted by Chris Cuomo. The guests are Andrew Black, a former special agent in charge of the FBI's Tucson field office, and Brian Entin, NewsNation's senior national correspondent, who has covered the case since day one. The segment opens on a fresh development. On June 30th, Reuters reported, citing an anonymous FBI source, that the notes were fake, while TMZ, who received one of them directly, publicly disputed that claim. Just 1 day later, on July 1st, the FBI issued a rare official statement of its own.
Ransom requests came. Did you believe those to be real?
The two notes that we received, that we responded to, I tend to believe those are real.
Savannah Guthrie. Man, what a horrible position for them. And to have to live out all this speculation and stuff, it's just terrible. The ransom notes, are kind of a lifeline, right? This sense that there's some kind of connection, there's some kind of possibility. And yesterday, there's reporting from Reuters that an FBI source claimed two ransom notes that were sent after Nancy's disappearance, one asking for money and the email sent to TMZ, claiming to have video, that those were determined to be fake. TMZ says the opposite. Then the FBI put out a statement that the FBI and its task force partners have received several ransom notes over the course of this investigation. Some have been deemed to be extortion attempts without legitimacy. Okay, so that means fake. Other ransom demands may potentially be legitimate and are still being investigated as such. So some are fake, some are a maybe. The case continues to be investigated as a kidnapping for ransom case. So what are we supposed to believe here?
Read that statement again slowly. Some notes are fake, some might be real, and the case is still officially a kidnapping for ransom investigation. That is three claims stitched together that each pull the story in a different direction, enough to dismiss the notes, enough to keep them alive, and enough to keep the original theory of the case intact, all in the same paragraph. This is code D7 in the TEL Index system. Excessive narrative control. A public statement engineered to satisfy every possible audience at once, rather than to actually clarify anything. Cross-checking this against the case file, what this statement is quietly reversing is the investigation's own earlier position. Back in February, per CNN's own law enforcement sources, investigators treated both early notes as genuine. 5 months later, the July 1st statement flips that entirely without ever framing it as a reversal. The method behind the fake conclusion is also concrete, not vague. Per the Daily Beast's sourcing, agents tested the Bitcoin address named in the first note by depositing a small trial amount into it. The money went untouched, meaning no one was actually waiting to collect on the other end. That's an objective, measurable test. What stands out is that the same statement still leaves room for other notes to be legitimate, without saying which ones or whether the same test was ever applied to them.
Let's bring in former special agent in charge of the FBI's Tucson office, Andrew Black, and NewsNation senior national correspondent Brian Entin, who's been covering the story from Jump. Good to have you both. Thank you. Andrew, I accuse you of the following. I believe the last time I had you on, we were talking about the notes, and you were hinting, I now believe, that I shouldn't invest too much analysis in these notes, especially the TMZ ones and even the ones at the FBI, that I'm sure they're looking at it, but this is not their main thing. Is this what you were pointing us towards, that there is a question mark over these notes for the FBI?
Yeah, I think there's always a question mark with these types of notes. I'm not saying that we should exclude them, but I'm not in favor of giving them authenticity without more evidence. And I think that's what we have here. I think we've gone like a full circle since I was on last time, because it didn't sound right when the FBI source and the FBI agents are trained when they go through Quantico never to share information with the media. It just didn't sound right to me. And I think that's why you see this note coming out from the FBI explaining, yes, we are following up on some of these. Some of these have been demonstrated to be false, but we're not excluding all of them.
Notice the sequence Black himself lays out. An anonymous leak to Reuters happens first, in violation of the Bureau's own protocol. Then, only after that leak generates public confusion, does an official statement appear to manage the fallout. Black frames this as the leak being a mistake by an individual agent. But the alternative reading is just as available from his own account. A controlled leak, followed by a controlled correction, is a two-step way to shape a public narrative without ever putting a named official on the record making the initial claim. Cross-checking this against the case file, and this is a detail the segment itself never mentions. This wasn't the first time the note's contents became public. Back in February, CNN and KOLD, the station that received both notes, had agreed with law enforcement and the Guthrie family to hold back the exact wording so that any future contact from the real kidnapper could be checked against details never released. That agreement held for nearly 5 months until CNN's own June 22nd report broke it, laying out the second note's contents in specific detail. Reuters' anonymous sourced report calling the notes fake came 8 days later, on June 30th. So the sequence Black describes isn't just one leak followed by one correction. It's an embargo that held for nearly half a year, broken first by a named outlet's own reporting, then followed by an anonymous leak pointing the opposite direction, then followed by an official statement trying to reconcile both.
Brian, explain a really great point that you're making about this, which is, look, my sources say that they are still serious about the notes, so they all haven't been clearly dismissed. Okay, but you make a great point, which is, well, if they really didn't believe in the notes, why wouldn't we have heard that from Savannah when she's talking to law enforcement? That's a very good point, Brian.
Yeah, and also the NBC reporting last week all about the notes. Remember, NBC News last week was Savannah sitting there. They're going through details of the note. Why would they be doing that if they just thought the notes were bogus? The thing is, Chris, when it comes to the Reuters reporting, there are people within the investigation who think the notes are fake. I know that. But there are people who think that they could be legit. The bottom line is they still just don't know. They don't know, so they have to continue to look into them. Maybe they'll pan out. Maybe they're all fake. They don't know at this point. What also stood out to me in that statement, though, that you read, Chris, and
this is the sharpest contradiction in the entire segment. And it isn't between two people. It's between what the Bureau said in writing and what the people closest to the case were actually doing at the same time. Specifically, the same week Reuters' anonymous source called the notes fake, Savannah Guthrie used her own platform, Live On Today, to renew a direct public appeal for anyone with information to come forward, not framed as the notes having been debunked, but appearing to respond directly to the reporting about them. It gets sharper still. When Newsweek reached out to the FBI directly for on-the-record comment that same week, the Bureau declined, while an anonymous source inside that same agency had already been willing to talk unofficially to Reuters just days earlier. An agency willing to speak off the record but not on it. In the same week, the victim's own daughter is still publicly responding to the material in dispute, is the clearest version of the mismatch this round is pointing at. It's worth being fair here, and only once in this video. Federal investigations routinely keep multiple leads alive in parallel, precisely so they don't tip off a suspect about which lead is actually working, and giving a deliberately vague public answer while still working a specific thread privately is a completely standard, legitimate investigative tactic. What's notable here isn't that the FBI is necessarily hiding wrongdoing. It's that three professionals with direct access to sourcing still can't agree on what a supposedly clarifying statement actually clarified, 5 months into a case with no suspect named. One official statement, built to satisfy 3 audiences at once. An embargo that held for nearly half a year, broken twice in opposite directions. And a declared position that doesn't match what the people closest to the case were actually doing that same week. Is this just how a federal agency manages an unsolved, high-profile case under intense media pressure? Or a pattern of saying one thing while doing another? Leave a comment below. I read everyone. And hit subscribe to see more analysis like this.